afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Very excited for today's event. Um, I would be willing to bet that nearly everyone on this call has either been a victim themselves or know someone close to them who's been a victim of cybercrime. It's really become a massive business, and in turn has attracted some of the best and biggest criminal organizations in the world. And with improved technology and AI, they're only getting better. They're only getting better faster. So. Um, it can be incredibly scary stuff to think about, but I also want to highlight some of the good news um, alongside that in this world of cybercrime, an ounce of prevention is really worth a pound of cure, or even, it's more like an ounce of prevention is worth a couple tons of cure. And that's why we have cybersecurity expert Mark Hurley with us today. He's currently the CEO of Digital Privacy and Protection, but prior to taking on the ever increasing problem of cybercrime, he had a storied career in the financial services industry with beginnings at Goldman Sachs before going on to become a CEO of Undiscovered Managers in the Fiduciary Network. But over the next 30 minutes, he's going to walk us through the latest tactics and techniques being used by these criminals. But even more importantly, some of the tactical steps that we can all implement right after this to better protect ourselves, to better protect our loved ones. And um, at the end of this presentation, we'll also be hosting a Q&A. So feel free to either hold your questions until the end of the presentation or pop them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen here as we go, and we'll address them at the end. And Mark's been kind. If we don't get to all of them in the allotted time, he will address them, send them back to us, and we'll get them back to everyone thereafter. So again, more questions the better. But with all that out of the way, Mark, floor is yours. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks a lot. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I also want to commend Brooke and his partners for doing this. Wealth management is about actively managing risk to wealth, and Brooke and his partners are one of the first firms to recognize that one of the single biggest risks to your wealth isn't the market going up or down, is that cyber criminals steal it. And so, they're taking a very proactive role in helping educate clients so they can understand these risks. Now, look, the class I'm going to do today, I'm going to cover a lot of things, and there's parts of it could be a little bit unnerving, but just relax. This is not hard to protect yourself. I'm going to show you what you need to do. And the reason why it's unnerving is most people never thought about this stuff. They go, oh my goodness, they can do that. It's kind of how they respond. So take a deep breath, relax. I want to walk you through, but we're going to show you a bunch of different things. A little background on whoops, where'd that go? This fell down. There it goes. A little background on my company. We provide a turnkey concierge type cyber protection service for the clients of wealth managers. We work with hundreds of firms across the country, including some of the largest aggregators. It was designed by guys who went to West Point with you, FBI or cyber officers. It's inexpensive. We can get you set up quickly. It's painless. And you can only get this through Brooks Firm. We do not sell direct to consumer. You go to our website, you'll see nothing about it because we're a very low profile thing. Like one of my partners used to run the Army cyber warfare strategy. Before that, he used to hunt terrorists down for a living for the government. At the end, I'll have some more info if anybody's interested. Okay. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to start with talking about who the bad guys are. And I'm sorry, who the bad guys are. Brooke, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Brooke?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
I
You,
can hear you
you
perfect.
figured it out. I just want to make sure. All right, let's talk
Yes.
about who the bad guys are. Who are these cyber criminals? What are they after? What are they doing? Where are you at risk? And how they will likely attack you. And what I mean by that is they have very specific tactics they've come up with now that are creative as imaginable. And I'm going to give you several examples of things they've actually done recently so you can think about this differently than you might have before. And then we're going to get to the part of how you protect yourself and your family. As I said, it's incredibly easy to do that. All right, let's start with the bad guys are. Now, when you think about cyber criminals, you can break them into two groups, and the first group has got a couple subgroups. If you were in downtown Beijing or you were in Moscow, you would see people walking down the street every day wearing suits and ties, carrying briefcases, going into buildings, and their job is to go steal money. They belong to criminal cyber gangs that openly operate in countries not just in Russia and China, but also Belarus, Iran, and North Korea. And they're run by people who by day work for their governments, either in the intelligence space or as cyber warfare officers. And at night they moonlight steal money. As long as their interests don't conflict with the state, they're allowed to openly operate, steal as much as possible. And they're incredibly sophisticated. And keep in mind, by day, they've already been able to breach the Department of Defense, CIA, blockchain, the cloud, anything which hard put their mind to. And then there's also less well known are thousands of very small but quite sophisticated cyber gangs. Now, if um, you see a movie like Hollywood, they portray these guys as some sort of overweight nerd in their mother's basement working on a computer. That's wrong. These are some of the most sophisticated users of artificial intelligence software. These gangs have fully automated their attacks, and these gangs don't just exist outside the United States. There are many of them within the United States. And what do they want? They're trying to get money. And the best place to get it clearly is your custodial account because that's where most of the money is. But they also like bank accounts. They like non-bank finance because it tends to have not as much protections as banks and custodians provide. And they also can use that, say, if they go through Venmo or PayPal to get into your bank account. And the other big thing they're trying to steal is non-public personal information. Uh, Basically, information they could use to steal your identity with. Now, in the United States, identity theft every year is a $54 billion industry. That's with a B. It's primarily used to steal credit. That's where most of the money is stolen. We've seen many instances now of health insurance being stolen and also tax returns and governmental benefits. Now, in protecting your wealth, the first thing you got to realize is kind of where you're at risk. And there's been a lot of, should I say, too much attention on one thing and not enough on others. There's a series of these identity protection service companies out there that have received large amounts of money from venture capitalists, and they spend a fortune on ads. Groups like Aura, at LifeLock, people like that, focused on identity theft. But what they don't point out to you is that that is not really your primary financial risk, because as I mentioned, identity theft, and you don't want it to happen to you. To be clear, that's I had someone steal a credit card. It took like 5 years to get off my credit report, but ultimately, you're not going to have to write a check if someone steals your credit. By federal statute and federal regulation, unless you're maliciously involved, it's the lender's risk. Now, what's problematic about this is it's diverted everybody's attention from the real risk. And quite candidly, it's everything else. You're taking 100% of the risk. For example, people think with your bank account, well, I got federal deposit insurance, and if something happens, the FDIC will make me whole. That's just wrong. The FDIC insurance is only there if the bank fails. What governs is the online banking account agreement. And the way those agreements are set up, if you're even indirectly at fault, they do not have to make you whole. We have a family in the Northeast that showed up on our doorstep about a year and a half ago, and somebody had gotten into their email and they used that to get into their Chase account, and they stole $360,000. And they went to Chase, and Chase said, "Not our problem. Read your agreement." And this is not any different with the custodians, the brokerages. Now, in fairness, these organizations, they spend a king's ransom, on their cybersecurity. I mean, just billions of dollars on this stuff. But every year they lose money because most people operate online with almost no personal cybersecurity. And so we're at the point now where they're kind of getting fed up and they're saying, well, not our problem. But this is not really anything different than any other online commerce. I don't know if anyone here on this call has ever read one of your online account agreements, like you go to Amazon or you go to eBay and they pop up an agreement, you scroll down quickly and say, I agree. If you actually read those agreements closely, the way they're set up, the company has the right to sue you. You do not have the right to sue the company. So a starting point about thinking about how do you protect your wealth when you're operating online is to fully recognize and accept that if you're doing anything financially or anything commercially, you're taking 100% of the risk and there is no recourse. As cheery as that is, meet the second group of bad guys. Now, they're made up of burglars and predators. You may recognize the gentleman in the middle. He was the national spokesman for Subway sandwiches for a long period of time. He's currently in a federally run gated community doing 15 years and 8 months. And what these guys want to do is they want to target your homes directly and indirectly, and they want to target your kids. And this aspect of this is what most people, when they think of cybersecurity, they kind of ignore, but candidly, it's what the FBI is particularly focused on because the statistics are just scary. About 1 million homes a year are burglarized nationwide. And a recent study found that about 80% of the time, the burglars are actually going into the improperly protected social media accounts of their victims because there's so much information in these accounts and you don't turn all the various privacy settings that come with the account. Anybody can see what's in there, and you can very quickly figure out which houses to target, and more importantly, where people are at all times, so you know when to go rob them. Additionally, title fraud, I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. That's kind of out of control. Um, about 12,000 times a year, someone will go into a county assessor's office. This is very common with vacation homes, and they'll walk in and say, put a filing in claiming they bought a property. And there's no way for the county assessor to know whether it's fraudulent or not, so they'll change the title. Well, what the crooks will do then is they'll start to borrow money against the property, rent it out, or sell it. And online stalking, I'm sure everybody's familiar with this. This is what the Bureau is most focused on. It's gotten so bad now, the FBI has a separate unit just to deal with teenagers being stalked online. All right, so how do you help yourself, help protect your family? The starting point for thinking about this is you really can't just do one aspect of protect yourself. You have to do both. There are really two things involved. Number one is cybersecurity, and the other one is cyber privacy. And if you take anything away from this presentation, you have to remember that if you don't have both, you have neither. Now, cybersecurity is about doing all the things I'll talk about, which is using really sophisticated passwords, um, uh, uh, putting on multi-factor authentication, doing all those kinds of things that make it harder for bad guys to get into your accounts using certain technologies. Cyber privacy is about limiting the non-public personal information about yourself and far, far more importantly, controlling who can access it. Now, unfortunately, today in our society, social media is an integral way of how we communicate with friends. And it's great if used correctly. But if you haven't turned on all the various privacy settings I'm going to talk about, anybody can see that information. And it's very, very easy for someone to go into that account, grab that information, and use it to get around your cybersecurity. And if you don't have robust cybersecurity, they can easily get around your cyber privacy. So you gotta have both or you have neither. All right, let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity. Rule one in the cyber business is if you're online, you're going to get breached at some point. I know it sounds depressing, but just relax. Everybody gets breached at some point. The CIA, Department of Defense, blockchain, cloud, they all get breached. The issue isn't whether you're breached, it's what happens after you're breached. And so, what cybersecurity is really about is rather than doing one or two things, you take multiple steps. So, you have like three or four things in place so that if the bad guys break through one area, they still got to get past three others. It's like a fort with multiple walls. And just because they breach one doesn't mean they get over the others. And if you put in all the protections that are available, and there are many that are already available if you turn them on, you quickly become what the military calls a hardened target. And what you become is really unattractive to the bad guys because the amount of resources required to try to steal anything of value from you just become too large. And quite candidly, a lot of their attacks are automated now. And there's so many people who don't do anything that they just move on to somebody else. So if I was going to describe the way to most best protect yourself from a cybersecurity standpoint is to make yourself really, really ugly to the bad guys. Now, let's talk about some of the ways you're likely to get breached. And these are the 7 most common ways today. But if I did this class a year ago, I wouldn't have a couple of them on there because this is all moving very, very fast. Okay, let's start with passwords. Now, I'm sure everyone hears about the corporate data breaches. Target had an enormous one many years ago. Uber has one every few months. AT&T had a big one last year. Well, whenever those happen, the cyber criminals have set their computers up so they can go and grab all that information. They throw them into very, very sophisticated algorithms using artificial intelligence software, and then they attack thousands of accounts at once. And they particularly want to obviously get into financial accounts, but they also want to target your telecom account and they want to target your email accounts. Because if you get into those two, you can get around the protections on your financial accounts. And it's right now, it's almost too ridiculously easy for the bad guys because most people don't use sophisticated passwords. And this is a chart taken from a company called Hive. They do a report every year where they do what are called simulated brute force attacks. It's a military term saying, I'm just going to use a computer and software to try to guess your password to get into your accounts. And at the end of 2023, they decided to try to use ChatGPT for the first time. And what they found was they now can correctly guess any 8-digit alphanumeric password. Okay, we're talking about uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols in less than 1 second. So if anyone on this call is using an 8-digit password, don't bother. Just put on password because they're not even going to downshift. They're going to blow right by it. If you're using a simple password, let's say there's a date, it's got 15 digits. So, no one will ever figure that out. With a computer, it took them 2 seconds. Okay. The way to think about this is the only way to protect your accounts is to use lengthy passwords. We're talking 20 to 25 digit, randomly generated, alphanumeric passwords. And you never, ever, ever reuse a password. They've got to be unique. Second most common way people get breached is they don't realize is that when you buy a device like this from the store, the way it's set up is it's designed to export your information to cyber criminals. And not cyber criminals, I'm sorry, companies. I think of them the same way sometimes. Companies who sell you the device and they sell you the people who provide the software, they make billions of dollars collecting your information and selling it to advertisers. So what they do is they set it up so the default settings automatically record every one of your passwords and user IDs for every account that you access. And then they collect them. And they're actually recorded in about 5 different places. Now, many of you may have seen the announcement last Friday that Google, Apple, and Facebook, it turns out that over several years, they've had 16 billion of these passwords stolen from them that they've collected over time. They're now sitting in a single database that criminals can easily access using AI software. But it doesn't require something even that sophisticated to take advantage of this. What cyber criminals increasingly are doing is they figured out that they can get into your device. They now can access all of these passwords very quickly. And there's an advisor on the West Coast was telling me a few weeks ago that he had a client who was down in Chile on vacation recently and was walking along and he was putting a passcode into his device and someone on a motorcycle came up, grabbed the device, and within a half hour, all the accounts were looted. There's even been a gang, a shoulder surfing gang the FBI has been dealing with, but there's many of these across the world now. And what they'll do is when you're in a bar or restaurant, you're not paying attention, they'll look over your shoulder, they'll watch you put the passcode in, and then they'll distract you and get the device. All right, how do you protect yourself against this? There's about 60 settings on an Apple device you need to turn on, and about 120 in a Windows. Now, if you turn those on, it stops recording this information. The device is extraordinarily secure. If you don't, all they got to do is get in the device and they got everything. Even if you're using a password manager, for example, they'll have the password to the password manager. Will be just sitting there that they can use. The third most common way people get breached is for their smart home technology. Now, it's great to have a coffee bot that turns on automatically, the doorbell, all that kind of stuff, but you got to set it up securely. And understand, cyber criminals have figured out if they can get into one piece of equipment on the network, what they can do then is use that to sit and watch everyone else on the network and see what they're doing. And we work with some, as they said, some of the largest financial services companies in the world use us for our service for them. And one of their senior executives at one of them, when they were diligencing us a couple of years ago, got hit in an attack where one morning, all of a sudden he was locked out, all his devices, he was locked out of his accounts. Bad guys were in his personal accounts. He couldn't even get in his home Wi-Fi. That's how bad it was. And they were in his work accounts too. Fortunately, we just happened to be there. We were able to freeze everything. It took like 9 days to get them up and running. What we figured out was they'd gone in through the doorbell and they'd sat there for 2 weeks copying passwords. And they do this automated. It's not like somebody has to sit there watching the whole time. Now, how do you protect yourself? Most of the new smart home online technology that you get for home, it comes with a randomly generated lengthy password to begin with, but you got to make sure the account associated with it is set up in a secure fashion. Because what the cyber criminals will do is they'll go into the account to use that to get to it. And wherever there's multi-factor authentication, you take advantage of it. Additionally, you never, ever, ever use the family name on the home Wi-Fi. You're just making it too easy for the bad guys. The fourth most common way people get breached is through computer viruses. It's also called malware. And what this is, it's software that gets behind your defenses. It automatically exports all your information. It gives bad guys access to your devices. And everywhere in the world someday, there's somebody writing new viruses, and then there are good guys that are trying to write antivirus. And it's an arms race. And sometimes the good guys win, sometimes the bad guys win. But the criminals have gotten much more sophisticated in dealing with it. One of the things they increasingly do now is they put them into fake apps. These are called Trojans. And we just got called in to help a family where they lost $320,000 because someone downloaded one of these. And what it is these are apps that look legitimate, and but they're packed full of computer viruses. And if you load them onto your device, you're effectively helping the bad guys breach you. Now, unfortunately, if you set your device down, say at a resort or a conference for more than about 30 seconds, someone can download this onto them. And that actually happens a lot. So how do you protect yourself? Number one, you never, ever, ever use any app unless you're metaphysically certain it's something you have to have And number two, it's legitimate. You also do never download apps from any site but the Apple and the Google site. You never get it directly from the website. If you see a website and they'll give you a link to go to the site, the Apple or Google site, don't trust it. Separately go and get the app. But the most important thing is less is more. Use as few apps as possible. Plus, you got to regularly check your device and see if there's any on there that you don't recognize. And if you see something that shouldn't be there, give us a call. We got to go wipe your phone really, really quickly. The other thing that the bad guys are increasingly are doing to try to get these things into your systems is they will hack into email accounts. And what they'll do is take an email that was sent from your advisor to you, and they'll infect it and send it back to your advisor, which in turn will give them access to the advisor systems and your accounts. So in other words, they've gone from simply just putting them out there, hoping people use them, to where they'll hack into people's individual accounts, use computers to read them, generate emails to the advisor, and then basically infect everybody here. And as I'll talk about, we've seen a lot of money stolen in attacks like this. The other way people get breached all the time is they don't recognize that when they're using public Wi-Fi, unless they're encrypting their traffic, they're basically giving away their passwords. As I said, if you're on a network, I can see what anyone else is doing on the same network. And so what cyber criminals will do is they'll sit in like a Starbucks, the hotel lobbies, things like that. You look around, you may see somebody sipping coffee all day, working on a computer. And unless you're encrypting your online traffic by using a piece of software that's called a virtual private network or VPN, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, anybody can see what you're doing. And they'll just sit through and copy your passwords all day, sell them to somebody else, and they'll use them to hit your accounts very quickly. Now, a more widespread attack we're seeing increasingly involves public charging stations. And I'm not sure if anybody on the call saw the article in the Wall Street Journal recently, but they found that every single public charging station at JFK was infected with viruses. And my partner, who's based in Harrisburg, who's used to run the Army cyber warfare strategy, says it's gone from being that it's likely if you plug into one of these devices without proper protection to almost certain that you'll get a virus in your device. Look, you plug into one of these things and you aren't using protection, which I'll show you in a second how. And it's not just public charging stations. We're talking rental cars. You're talking the back of an airline seat. We're talking about plugging into a hotel. And I'm not mean with the actual power cord. I mean with the USB charger. What happens is your information gets automatically taken out and criminals know how to grab it and sell it. And number two, they inject a virus into your device. The good news is it's not hard to protect yourself. What you do is you go and you see a picture of this in the middle here, what's called a USB blocker. You can get one from Target, Walmart, Amazon. They're like $2. I buy a bag at 10. I carry them with me wherever I go. And you plug this in, you put your cord in the back of this, and the only thing happens is electricity comes in. It makes it all this stuff really easy and safe to use. Now, the seventh most common way people get breached is a new type of attack that I wasn't talking about less than a year ago. And it has exploded. And someone on this call is probably going to get hit by one of these attacks because they grew by 440% last quarter. This is a new way of stealing that in 1 year has gone from zero to $40 billion annually. And here's how it works. They're going to call you and they're going to pretend to be either your bank, your custodian, or even your advisor. And they have the ability to make their phones produce someone else's caller ID. It's called spoofing a caller ID. So it'll show up as saying Schwab or Fidelity, or it'll say, Presilium will show up on the caller ID. So you think they're legit. And they're going to try to get you to act urgently. They'll say something like, Brooks on an airplane right now, and he just texted me. We think somebody's in your account. And we've got to take some steps to protect your money. Now, if you give them access to your account, every dollar on that account is going to be gone. Now, how do you protect yourself against this? This is just pure education. You have to understand there is no financial institution on the planet that's ever going to do this. What they're going to do is lock your account, and they're going to let you get on an 800 number and spend 4 or 5 hours trying to get it unlocked. They never take steps like this, but it's hard to overstate how slick these guys are. We had two of our clients got hit in these attacks a few months ago. We've trained them never ever to do this, and both of them told us they were about 3 steps in before they realized, wait a minute, we got to call DBP first, otherwise the account could get cleaned out. Now let's talk a little bit about cyber privacy. Now the problem for cyber privacy for everybody in the U.S. is all this fabulous new online technology we have. As I mentioned, the companies have an economic model where they collect your information and they sell it. For example, Meta, which has Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, They make $60 billion a year collecting customer information and selling it to advertisers. Amazon makes more money selling your information to advertisers than they do selling your product. And so all these companies, what they do is they set their technology up. So the default settings allow them to take tons and tons of information and export it and then package it and sell it. Problem is cyber criminals have figured out how to get to that information and use it to do breach cybersecurity. Now, the good news is companies allow you to opt out of this and protect yourself. But the bad news is they make it difficult, because they make billions of dollars. They don't want to make it easy. So what you have to do is you have to go turn on a litany of settings on your devices, your search engines, your browsers, and your apps. Meta has about 80 settings. LinkedIn's got like 100. LinkedIn on its own, I think, is 119 you have to turn on. Amazon is 37, I think you have to turn on. But if you don't turn these settings on, all the information in your account is effectively in the public domain, and cyber criminals can grab it and use it very simply. Now, I mentioned earlier about burglars. This is a core way they figure out which houses to hit and how to rob. Far worse, and again, I'm not trying to scare anybody, but just, you got to take some steps to make sure you act properly and responsibly online. This is what child predators use. They will regularly go into parents' and grandparents' accounts, and they'll download information about kids. They'll profile them. They'll figure out, who their friends are, their activities, where they go to school, all this kind of stuff. And then they will connect with the kids online in these private chat rooms, and they'll be anonymous, and they'll pose as one of their peers, typically of the opposite sex. And over time, they'll build the kid's confidence. They'll convince them that, oh, you can trust me, et cetera, and they'll get the kid to share some really personal and embarrassing information with the criminal. And at that point, the criminal will start blackmailing the kid. And about 10 to 15 times a month, kids commit suicide over this. This is what the FBI is really focused on. And again, it's not hard to protect yourself, and I'm going to show you how, but look, you got to be responsible if you're going to be online, because it's not just about your money. It's about your home. It's about your kids. It's about your grandkids. All right. The other thing that's changed that's really making things, shall we say, more interesting if you don't protect your various cyber privacy has been the advent of what are called deep fakes. And we see these attacks all the time. And what the criminals will do is they will go into unprotected social media accounts. And again, unprotected meaning they don't have to hack in. They just have to not have privacy settings on them. And what they'll do is they'll download videos using AI software. They will clone the voices and images of the people they want to target. And it's not hard for them to do this. There's a site now for $4.95 will allow you to clone anybody's voice, and it'll defeat voice recognition software. There's even a YouTube video will show you how to make one of these for a Zoom call. And two examples of how we run this just recently. There was an advisor on the East Coast who was telling us that she had a client who was using a custodian that allowed her to use voice recognition because she didn't feel like putting the password in. She turned that on. Well, unfortunately, she didn't protect her social media, so the bad guys came in, downloaded videos, cloned her voice, and stole $2 million out of her retirement account. About 3-4 weeks ago, we got called in on a fake kidnapping in Arizona. There's a lady who had a grown daughter. Both the grown daughter and the lady had not protected their social media. They had not turned all the settings on. The daughter didn't have a good password on her telecom account. So what cyber criminals did is they could figure out where the daughter was at any time and where the mother was, and they could figure out a point where the mother would not be able to physically see the daughter. And then they cloned the daughter's voice, and then they diverted the daughter's cell phone, and then they texted the mother saying, "We have your daughter. You're either going to wire $200,000 to a crypto account, or we're taking her to Mexico." And the mother then picked the phone up immediately and called the daughter, but the criminals had diverted the cell phone. So when it was answered, what the mother heard was a clone voice of the daughter calling for help. So the mother, with the criminals on the phone, actually went to the bank branch while the criminals are still on the line. The bank refused to wire the money. They told her to go to another branch. They went to another branch, and the money was sent. Okay, this is just a few weeks ago. This happens all the time. The good news was we fortunately got in early, and then we got the right people, and the FBI got involved, and the crypto company sent the money back. And that's like 1 in 1,000. Usually it never, ever happens. But again, you got to understand these guys are getting very creative. And so when you're thinking about protecting yourself, it is not just good passwords, it's also all these settings that you have to turn on to protect your cyber privacy. And I'll give you a few examples of recent ones so you get a sort of how the parts fit together. As I mentioned, there was $360,000 stolen from a Chase account, a family that is now a client. They weren't a client before. It was the lady owned a couple restaurants, and what she was doing was regularly making payments to various vendors for her company through her Chase account. Unfortunately, even though she had used a robust password on her email account, she'd used something similar on her other accounts. And with AI software, very, very easy for the bad guys to correctly guess that password. And they downloaded it from another company had a data breach. They grabbed that data in the data breach. They then figured out what the reused password would be, and they hit the victim's email account. And keep in mind, these guys are not spending hours looking at stuff on screens. It's all automated. So they downloaded the emails. They quickly could identify this pattern of vendor payments. They then used the similar password also to get into the Apple keychain of the person, which gave them the password to the Chase account, both the user ID and password. Because again, on your devices, if you've not turned all these settings on, in about 5 different places, you can easily go grab the passwords and use the user IDs for every account that's been accessed. And then what they did is they went in and changed the wiring instructions on the account. And guess what happened? Bye-bye $360,000. We also, as I mentioned, 200,000 stolen on a fake kidnapping. And to walk you through again, what happened there was the family had not protected their social media account. The bad guys cloned the voices. They went into the daughter's telecom account, diverted the call. They then spoofed the caller ID, contacted the mother on a text message saying they had kidnapped her daughter. The mother tried calling. Cell phone was diverted. The daughter's voice was cloned, so she thought they had her daughter. They demanded 200K. She went to a bank branch. The first bank refused to do this, so while the criminals stayed on the phone, they went to the next branch. Out went $200,000. Another recent example that we ran into this to give you a sense of how these parts fit together. And this is why you can't just do one thing. You got to do all this stuff to protect yourself, although it's not that complicated. There's a family and this happened late last year. There's a family that had been dreaming of buying an apartment in Paris for years and been talking to their advisor about it by email, and they were planning a trip. Unfortunately, one of the family members had actually gone through JFK in a recent trip and had plugged their cell phone into a public charging station, and it got a virus. The virus allowed them to get behind all the defenses and access the email. Again, it's all automated. They quickly could read this with computers and see what was coming up with Paris. So they waited for the family to take off for Paris. And once they knew they were there, they changed the password on the email account. And then they emailed the advisor saying, hey, we found the apartment. Here's a picture of it. We need $2 million. And the advisor, being a good fiduciary, said, whoa, whoa, whoa. There's a lot of money. We got to do a confirmatory call. I know you're excited about this, but we're going to make sure this is legitimate. Well, the same family had not protected their social media accounts. The bad guys not only could download videos and clone their voices, they were able to profile the family because, again, they were using this every day to communicate with friends so they could see all the stuff that was going on in their life on a day-to-day basis and learn a lot about them. The family also had not put a robust password on their telecom account, so the bad guys went in and diverted the cell phone. And what wound up happening was the advisor wound up doing a 45-minute call who they thought was the client. It wasn't. And bye-bye $2 million. All right, how do you protect yourselves? I've got enough of the stuff of the bad news. It's not that hard to protect yourself and your family and your wealth. Okay, what everyone needs to have is what is called basic cyber hygiene. And what do you think of this? It's like a fort with 4 walls. You can't skip any of the walls or don't bother building the other ones. But if you put this, you're really well protected and it's hard for the criminals to get to you. Number one, every single online account that you have has to have a unique, randomly generated 20 to 25 digit alphanumeric password, and you got to make sure your smart home technology is similarly set up in a secure fashion. Number two, as I mentioned, you got to make your devices secure. There's about 60 settings on an Apple device. Example is with this device, you may not realize this, but you can automatically encrypt your online backup, but you have to turn it on. And that way, in case you're on a network that's been compromised, someone can't just download your information when you back up your phone. The reason Apple doesn't turn it on is because they like to see when you're backing it up, all your information. But if you turn it on, it encrypts it. Nobody can see it. In fact, all these things are really designed to be extraordinarily safe. But if you don't turn on the settings, they're very easy for the criminals to access. And there's this conflict of interest between the companies and the software providers and the actual clients. Another example is the default setting, say on a laptop, is having your Bluetooth on. Well, okay, you're on an airplane and you're working. You realize anybody within 9 rows can look inside your device and see what you're doing, copy passwords and things like that. This happens a lot. So you got to go in, turn all these settings on. But if you do, very hard for the bad guys to get you. And then the real heavy lift are all the apps, search engines, and browsers. As I mentioned, there's a lot of settings you got to turn on. And you also should turn on multi-factor authentication. In other words, you want to have it so that every time you put the password in, they'll send you a separate code. It makes it, doesn't completely prevent from getting hit, just makes it more complicated. It raises the stakes for the bad guys to get into the account and steal anything. But if you turn all this stuff on, what you become is you're a hardened target. But to do this, unless you're some sort of savant, you're going to need some technology to help you. And good news, it's widely available and it's inexpensive. Number one, unless you're a genius, how is anybody to remember 400 accounts, each with unique 20, 25-digit passwords? The way you do that is you get software. It's called a password manager. We recommend Keeper. Very, very easy to use. Our average client's age is 70, so this is not something necessarily for technophiles. What you do is you get all your accounts, you put them in the password manager, you reset all the passwords, and then the only thing you have to remember is the password to the password manager. And once you're digitally organized, it just dramatically simplifies your life because all you do is put your passcode in, it opens up, you click on the account, about 80, 90% of the time, it'll autofill the fields. The other 10, 15% of the time, you push a button, copy the password, and paste it in. I shared this with Brooke and his partners. You know, my girlfriend's a partner at a big four firm, and she's told me she's not sure she's keeping me, but now that I've got her set with a password manager, she's never getting rid of it. It just simplifies your life. The second thing everyone needs, I mentioned, was a virtual private network. And this is software that automatically encrypts your online traffic. Comes on automatically, makes it so no one can see what's inside your device. Now, we recommend for that Surfshark. It's a British Virgin Islands company. It's the only one has passed the highest standards of audit. It's never been breached. Incredibly secure. And it's very, very easy to use. And then the third thing everyone used to have is a private email. Now, this is going to sound a little counterintuitive. It doesn't replace any of your existing emails, but rather what you're going to use it for is if I can do all these other steps, I still can get around them by getting into your daily use email. And what I'm going to do is then go to your various financial accounts and click on the forgot password link, and they'll send me a reset link. So the way you prevent that is all your financial accounts will allow you to use a different email for a recovery email. So that you can have a regular use email for all regular communications, but if someone hits the password link, it goes to the recovery email. Now, this is a pay-for service. You never use a free one for this because with artificial intelligence software, the bad guys can find this thing very quickly. So instead, you get a pay-for email and you put your initials on it. You don't use your name. And you put this in only for account recovery purposes, and you don't make it easily accessible on your devices. So that if someone, say, gets in your device, they can't, and then therefore access your email, they can't start changing all your passwords because instead it goes to this account, which has to be separately opened up to get to. But with this technology and all these settings, boy, you're a hardened target. We work with many, many, many families across the U.S. and Canada. In the 3.5 years we've been doing this, we've never had anybody get breached and lose money. Now, the only catch, though, is this is not a solution. This is a process. You got to have a way to keep it current because a lot of things are going to change over time. So, for example, everyone gets new accounts. People get new smart home technology. You get new devices, you retire devices, you may even lose a device. And more importantly, companies really hate it when you turn all these privacy settings on because they're making billions of dollars collecting your information. So about once a year, they change them. So to keep this working, you have to have an ongoing process to update it. And at least once a year, you have to assume you're going to go back and completely re-update soup to nuts, front to back to keep it fully current. Now, with this, you're really incredibly secure. You got nothing to worry about. The only thing I would recommend on top of this, though, is because people do make mistakes, is kind of a second layer of early warning protection. Many of you may have heard of the dark web, but it's most of the people who steal your passwords actually don't have offshore operations. So there's an aftermarket where they sell them on part of the internet called the dark web. And there are companies you can subscribe to that will check to see if someone's trying to sell the password, say to your bank account, or sell your credit card, or sell your debit card, something like that. And so you subscribe to one of these services, and they'll give you an early warning. Now, to be clear, once it gets to that point, you got a real problem. You probably lost some money, but this keeps it from losing money to becoming a catastrophe. The other thing you should do, I mentioned title fraud. The only way to protect against that is you need to go to the local county assessor's office and register, so they'll send you a notification if anybody makes a filing. And they'll send you an email and or a text message saying, hey, somebody made a filing on your property. And the second you get that, you pick the phone up and you call them and find out what's going on, because that's the only way to stop title fraud. Lastly, you've got to keep in mind that none of this is, if you ever get a breach or you ever have a problem, it does not get better with time. And I've heard some myths, from many people saying like, oh, just freeze your credit, you'll be fine. That's just baloney. Okay. We've never heard anybody lose money that we've done our service for, but we've had a lot of people who've lost insane amounts of money show up on our doorstep looking for help. And to help get them set up again, we've been to the FBI, we've been to the FTC, we've been to the passport office, we've been to the sheriff's office, we've been even to the Apple store. It's very case specific, and you always overcompensate to protect against this stuff. But again, if you do all this, you can relax. You don't have to worry. There's, you will be fine. Before I take questions, I always get one question to start this, which is, hey, Mark, you started the class by saying, no matter what we do, we're still going to get breached. Now, explain to me again, why do I want to do all these steps? And the best way to think about this is an old joke. Two guys are walking in the woods, and they stumble onto a bear. The bear gets up and gets ready to charge, and one guy sits down and starts putting on track shoes. And the other guy turns to him and goes, are you out of your mind? Even with track shoes, you can't outrun the bear. And the guy says, look, man, I don't have to run the bear. I just got to outrun you. Cybersecurity is about making yourself ugly to the bear. Do all these little things, and very quickly, they just go after somebody else. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions anybody might have.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. As some of our questions start to come in, there was one I wanted to just kick things off with. If there were maybe two or three things that everyone should walk away with and implement right away just to make themselves uglier to the bear, harder targets, what would you suggest out of the gate?
Unfortunately, there's not one or two things. The basic cyber hygiene, as I'm showing on the screen here, it's really an all or none thing, because you're leaving off one of the walls on the fort. Okay. If you do each of these things, you're secure. If you don't, you're insecure. Now, it takes a lot of time, but when the technology is cheap, we're talking, you're not gonna spend much money on this. It's a fair amount of work to do it on your own. But you know, if you're going to use an app, you got to use it safely. And part of using an app is to turn all the settings on. If you're going to have a device, you got to use it safely. Part of using a device is turning on all the settings. And any kind of account you have, you got to use robust passwords. And then, because we're a connected world everywhere we go, you should get the basic technology. But none of this is nuclear physics, people. This is just easy to use. Once it's set up, oh, you won't even notice it most of the time. It's that easy.
We've got a couple that have come in that are around the differences, or what are the differences between passwords, pass keys, passphrases, or are one of them different or better than the other?
Great question. Okay, passkeys are, it's another form of using a password. It's an electronic password that some sites automatically generate. And that's this way you can't put your cat's name in. Instead, it's something that's automatically generated. Now, the catch with a passkey, though, is the companies that sell your devices, as well as the software providers, like to capture these. And they'll say, oh, it's safe because it's a sophisticated pass key. But if someone gets into your device, they can grab all your pass keys. So it's really not any different than using a sophisticated password. And you have to store it in a password manager and make sure your device is set up so it's not recording any of this kind of stuff. Otherwise, it's just sitting there to be grabbed, no differently than any other password you would use.
And as it relates to password managers, why did you guys, or how did you all land on Keeper as the
Uh,
preferred
we,
provider?
we diligenced, and I'm not exaggerating, 100 plus providers when we were looking at this. And there are some providers out there that are backed by shell companies out of Iran, North Korea, Russia, or China. So you have to be careful with some of those. The assumption is if it's free, don't use it. Write that down, put it on stone over your bed. Number two, a big part of the ones that aren't backed by necessarily unsafe people, is to collect and sell your information. So, for example, LastPass, which is a really secure piece of software, notwithstanding some of the press they had, the reason we passed on that is they collect and sell your information. And again, I hope you take anything away from this is if you don't have cyber privacy, you don't have cybersecurity. You have to have both. Either you have neither. And so we also were very focused on finding what was extremely easy to use. In our experience, people are only going to protect themselves if they meet three tests. Number one, that it's not burdensome to operate online. Otherwise, you just get annoyed. Number two, we have found that customers are more worried about privacy in some ways, even than security. And they're maybe it's because we've educated them well, but you want to make sure that no one's monitoring what you're doing online and selling your information. And number three, there's enormous price elasticity involved. People won't do this unless it doesn't cost a lot to do this because I'm being a little sarcastic here, but it's just somewhat like a colonoscopy. People for years wouldn't get colonoscopies done saying, there's nothing certain there. Fortunately, with enough education, people have realized, okay, yeah, you may be okay, but if you're not okay, you're really bad. And as more and more people are getting hit with cyber criminals, they're kind of starting to view this, okay, maybe I should get the colonoscopy, maybe I should do these steps. But if you meet those three tests, and our service is fairly inexpensive, but you do this on your own, it's not a lot of money. If you do this, in many ways, you won't really notice that much different when you're operating online. It's almost invisible. But boy, you're geometrically more secure.
When you get phishing emails, I guess two part. One, what is the best way to handle those, and or does unsubscribing from them when you receive them work?
No, you should never click on anything. End of discussion. Period. You should delete them. Period. I mean, look. There are about uh, every single day worldwide, 1.5 billion of these are sent. It's all fully automated. Now you'd think by now, no one would ever click on one of these things. Well, guess what? About 200 million times a day, someone worldwide clicks on one of those links. The obviously with education, and I'm sure your clients are far more sophisticated than other people, then they don't do this. Increasingly, the way they're getting them into you will be posing as somebody else and trying to get you to click on an attachment. So, like if a friend sends you an email and they have an attachment they want you to look at, you probably want to call your friend first and just check and make sure it's legitimate.
Yep. I think perhaps sort of alongside the question around Keeper, but just related to private paid email service providers. I know you've got private mail here. Are there others that you would put in the same type of category or that you
Yeah,
all move
there
into?
are a lot of good email providers out there, and there's also overkill. Like for example, Proton Mail, incredibly secure. First off, remember, you're only going to use the email for one purpose. Use it for anything else, you've compromised it, which is account recovery. You want it so that no of the bad guys don't even know it exists. You don't even put your name on it. So you don't need to spend a fortune. It's like $10 a month to get a good one. And but someone say like a Proton, which is unbelievably secure, it's designed for if you think the NSA is stalking you or the foreign intelligence services are, and then the agreement they have is that because they're a Swiss-based company, that if they get a subpoena to access your emails from these governments, they will move it to another country. Okay, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that if you're worried about it, but you don't really need to spend the kind of money they charge for that. What you but you do want a private provider. In other words, you want one where you pay for it. Otherwise, what they're doing is reading all your emails and they're selling this information. And with AI software, this thing can get compromised very, very quickly.
What is your feeling about providing sensitive information or like social security number to online ticket resellers like Ticketmaster, for example?
Don't. I don't have to put my social security number in my Ticketmaster. I've never had them ask me for that. I've never seen that. I'm wondering. You don't provide it. Period.
Yeah.
That's my answer.
Yeah.
Uh, I see a question about do I have to turn on all the security settings to all my accounts along with password keeper, VPN, and private mail? Yes. Short answer, Julio. Yes.
Yep.
That's all part of the. It's like a. It's one. Each of those are one wall of the fort.
Um, would you recommend using biometrics where and when possible?
Uh, yes and no. Okay. I wouldn't use biometrics on some third-party site or something like that. I would recommend, for example, if you set up Keeper on your phone, you could use on something like that, say facial identification, because that will simplify your life. You'll be less annoyed. It's not as secure as putting the password in, but you should set it with multi-factor authentication. So there's a code that also comes. The challenge with biometric authentication, if you overuse it, is that what biometric authentication does is they take your face and they generate using some sort of algorithm a number that effectively is assigned to that to your biometric. If that's ever compromised, unless you plan to get past plastic surgery, you probably don't want to overuse it because you make it very easy for someone to start taking advantage of that.
And we can send this out afterwards, but if you wouldn't mind just one time repeating the steps for title protection.
Yeah, just pick up the phone, call your county assessor's office wherever you have properties, and say, I want to register for you to send me a notification if there's a filing on my property. Just let me know if someone makes a filing, and they'll typically send you both an email and a text message. Most everyone we run to ultimately do that. And if you get the message, nanosecond later, pick the phone up and call them, find out what's going on.
Perfect. And this
Do I
question from Gene. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the handout of device security settings. No, unfortunately, we do not. And here's why. They change constantly and they change the questions. So, like, we are watching this constantly and updating all the time. And no, we don't. And they're very, very personally specific too. In other words, like with our service, you set it up to fit what the client is actually doing versus what they're not doing because there's certain things you need to have on in case you're doing certain things versus other things if you're not doing them. So unfortunately, there's not, and there's like 900 settings that are constantly moving. Um, I got a question I'd love to answer here. What
Yep.
service do you provide? Delighted to talk about that. All right. Uh, 1 second. I'll bring up our service. This is an overview of what we do. Brooke has been set up. He can tell you his experience. What we do is come in and we're going to create a personal layer digital security structure for you, and we will help you then manage your risk. Again, everything we do, you can do yourself. We're kind of like an online landscaping company where we can do it cheaper than you can do it on your own, and we can do it faster. And it costs $35 a month. It covers up to 3 devices, and a device is a desktop, a laptop, a cell phone, or a tablet. If you have more than 3, for an extra $5 a month, we'll throw in 3 more. And the only upcharge we have is some families don't want to share any, say, a password manager. So, like, I have 5 teenage kids. There's no chance in Hades they're going to give me their email passwords. So we had to set them up separately. So for $25 a month more, we'll double it if there's a separate family member you want us to set up. You pay us the first year's fee up front, and then it's quarterly in advance. Most families pay us $35, $40 a month. And what are we going to do? We're going to do all the stuff we talked about here. We're going to come in and install the technology. The service includes everything. It includes the Keeper, Surfshark, includes the private email. We'll put it on your devices. We'll go grab all your accounts. We'll put them in your password manager. We'll reset them to unique randomly generated passwords like we talked about. Keeper has a way to generate that. Now, we do this with a Zoom appointment, and our technology is set up so we can never see, access, or copy any of your passwords at any time. And we record our appointments, and we're happy to give you a copy of the recording if you want it. We have a separate group to review them for quality control internally. And then we'll do the same thing and make sure your smart home technology is set up. Now, typically it takes 1, maybe 2 appointments to get somebody completely set up, depending how many accounts. We've run into people with 1,100 accounts. That takes a little longer than if you got, say, 100 accounts. But we're not going to quit till we get everything safe and secure. And it takes about 3 hours with about 45 minutes of your time, about 3 hours access to your devices, and you can do other things while we're doing this. So it's just you just have an appointment on. You can work on other stuff, and we need you. We'll ask questions, or if you want to, step by step, we'll explain what we're doing. And then after we get you set up, we'll put in the second layer of protection for you. We'll collect some information from you that we'll track on the dark web. As I mentioned, we've contracted with a company called Dark Owl, the top dark web search company. They work with Israelis, they work with Ukrainians. They're very, very good. The only time we had anything ever pop up once we got somebody set up was when Fidelity got breached last August and didn't disclose it till October. Once a year, we'll do annual update with you, and as part of that, we'll pull down your credit reports and take a look at them. Look, identity protection services, which emphasize all this, they're a lot like pregnancy tests, and what we're doing is birth control. By the time you get to them, you got a real problem. And also, what they don't tell you is most identity theft is not of adults, it's of kids. Because kids now have social security numbers. So you can steal a kid's identity 5 or 6 times before somebody figures it out. So we'll check to see if your kids have any credit reports too. If there's ever a problem, we're open 24/7. We never close. We only get upset if you don't call us. We got called yesterday by a family that someone got into they have a vacation home. Someone got into the telecom account. We got a team on it right away, got it fixed. Um, and although we had never had anybody get breached and lose money, we had so many people show up looking for help that we're very, very experienced in fixing this stuff. And then we update this stuff. And once a year, we'll come back in and do a full Monty update. But on an ongoing basis, there are certain things we'll do to make sure you stay current. And education is the cornerstone of all this. So this class that I'm doing today, I'm doing, for companies I worked with last year, I'm doing a second class for them. And we update because this stuff evolves very quickly. And if we think we need to do a class sooner because we're seeing some new threats, we'll get with Brooke and his team and schedule another class for you. Now, if you're interested, you can go to our landing page on our website. It's solely for Presilium clients. If you come into the site, what you'll see is uh, a uh, 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 a form will pop up, and you have to put your advisor's information in and their email account because you cannot get this except through Brooks Firm. And he'll get an email, and what will happen is you'll get a text message, and in the text message there'll be a calendar link, and you can schedule 10, 15, 30-minute meeting, however long you need. And we'll walk you through the service and answer any questions that you have. And if you're interested, we'll get you set up and get you going, get an appointment scheduled. We do this with many, 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 many firms across the United States and Canada.
I think real quickly as a follow-up to that, if someone subscribes to your service, do they still need LifeLock or
Nope.
similar
Yeah, let's
provider?
talk a little bit about that real quickly. If I you take any away from this, I would really be skeptical, I guess is the polite way to describe it, about things like LifeLock. Okay. Again, they do not, they don't prevent you from getting breached. They just let you know. Now, some of them even provide some really mediocre technology that you can do yourself, but it'll take you about 150 hours in our experience. And most people don't have the time or patience to figure it out. But more importantly, what these companies do is they don't do anything about your digital privacy. And I hope if you take anything away from this call is that if you aren't protecting your digital privacy, you've got no digital security. And in fact, these companies actually collect and sell your information. It's a big part of their business. And worst of all, the way they sell their services is they come with insurance or reimbursement guarantee up to $3 million. Sleep safe at night. Don't worry if anything happens to your money. Well, if you actually read the policies, I would argue they're almost uncollectible. The way they're typically set up is they have an exclusion for simple negligence, which is a legal standard, meaning if you made a mistake anywhere along the way, they have no liability. And even worse, they're typically umbrella policies. They're not first loss, meaning, if a tornado hit your house, your company would write you a check less your deductible. Here, you first got to sue everybody, your custodian, your bank, your advisor, anybody could even be partially liable, spend an enormous amount of money, many years trying to collect from them. Then only after that you can take the insurance company to arbitration, and the if you lose the case, there's a reasonable likelihood you'll have to pay their legal fees. I don't think they've ever paid a material claim. LifeLock was literally started by a con man while the con man was still in prison. So any of these identity protection services, I'd be really do not rely on me by advice strongly.
Excellent. Last couple here, and then any others that come in, we'll just send to you for reply later. But one related to mailing a check, and just wondering if that is safe, putting a check into the mail, as she's hearing a lot of incidents of
Yeah,
check washing.
yeah. Check washing is incredibly common. And you really want to protect yourself. Have one account that you keep a limited amount of money on that you write your checks from, and the other account you separate from it because they only use the check that's washed to for that account, and that's the way to limit your potential losses there.
Um, as it relates to utilizing a VPN, if the device doesn't leave your home, is there any reason to utilize a
Oh,
VPN or
absolutely.
just
Absolutely. The reason you have a device on a VPN on your device at home is if someone gets into your home network. If somehow your home network gets breached, which you'd never know if it happened, the VPN's on, it doesn't matter. They can't see what you're doing on your device. And the last question, is it safe to use the Google password manager? Should I keep it offline? Never, ever, ever use the Apple or Google password managers. Okay. If anything we've learned from this $16 billion, 16 billion worth of passwords that have been compromised that they just disclosed recently is that they're collecting passwords and storing them. And if they get breached, everything is compromised. Look, the military uses a term called compartmentalization. In other words, you want to make it so that just because someone gets into one place, they can't get into the other. And the most vulnerable part of your compartmentalization is you got to protect is where you store your passwords. And the only safe way is to have a separate password manager, not provided by Google or Apple or none of these free things, but a pay for password manager that has layers of encryption on it. And you're the only person that has the passcode to that. And you make sure that the passcode is at least 20 digits. Now, the easiest way to do that, remember it, is to pick a verse out of a song you really like, and then put in 3 or 4 symbols, mix them into the verse. That's a good, robust password. But it's vital you write this down and put it in a safe. Because if anything ever happens to you, your family's not going to be able to get into the accounts because you're the only one to have that. But never ever rely on a password manager that's linked to these other companies. They just, if the company gets breached, everything you have is compromised.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it. And thanks for joining us, everyone. My hope really for this is that we walk away not necessarily feeling scared, but more so empowered and knowing that there are simple but effective ways that Mark laid out for us here to protect ourselves and to protect our families. But we will plan to send out the recording of today's events as well as a few key follow-ups here shortly. But if there are any additional questions for Mark, feel free to send them to anyone on the team. We'll make sure that he gets them and get them back to you. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a great rest of your day and look forward to talking with you again soon. Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
very much.